It's a battle of past versus present in this, a look at the HTC One M9 and its earlier brethren, the HTC One M8. It's Joshua Vergara from Android Authority, and here's your quick look in this versus video. If you happen to be one of the people that wanted a much different design in the HTC One M9, well, HTC opted to follow the M8's and the M7's design almost to a T, putting the two together in order to create a whole new DNA of sorts. Whether that's good or bad depends on how you feel about the M8 and the M7, but you're going to get elements of both in the brand new One M9 because this two-tone coloration not only has a different hue on the rim, as you can see in this gold-rimmed version of the silver edition of the HTC One M9, but you'll see that the elements also include a shell of sorts that comes from the back, comes over to the sides, and then it tapers in to provide the front panel that concaves a little bit into the sides. And it also makes the device a lot easier to grip, especially considering the back rather, whose material is definitely not as slippery as it was found in the HTC One M8. Now, the biggest design difference between the two phones is going to be the camera module on the back, because the One M9 features a squared camera module that is protruding slightly out but is much larger than the camera found in the One M8. And that is because of a 20 megapixel larger sensor on the M9, which we'll get into a little bit later. HTC also gave up on the depth sensor from the M8 and relocated the power button to the side, which is a welcome change. You no longer get a dual camera on the top, but you also don't get that power button on the top either. But if the designs of the phones are very similar, the displays are downright identical. Both feature full HD resolution in a 5-inch package, ensuring a very crisp experience. And while competitors are adopting Quad HD, HTC is content with Full HD for now. But the only real difference between these two displays is the fact that the M9, at least in our testing thus far, shows a much cooler temperature compared to the warmer colors of the M8. The One M9 is one of the first devices to be powered by the new Snapdragon 810 chip by Qualcomm, featuring 8 cores and a 64-bit architecture. HTC also upgraded the memory to 3 GB of RAM, and storage stays at 32 GB, though it will be expanded by micro SD cards if you so choose. And on the other hand, last year's M8 was not really that far behind with its Snapdragon 801 and 2 GB of RAM, but the real story here is that Sense 7, the new version of Sense on the HTC One M9, absolutely flies through its elements, even with a couple of the added elements that they put into this new version of HTC Sense. As you can see in this little video right here, I'm really trying to multitask and go pretty nuts on the Sense 7 interface here, and it is able to keep up with me without any problems. And in camera, HTC is going back to a conventional camera sensor on the M9, but if you do miss the ultra-pixel camera, it has been brought over to the front in order to bring great self-portraits to the fray. Nonetheless, though, the 20 megapixel rear-facing camera is supposed to bring a lot of good enhancements to the camera experience from the M8, but in our testing so far, we have seen that it's a little bit uneven. Low-light performance on ultra-pixel is already proving itself on the M9 in its front-facing iteration, and it did do a bit better of a job on the M8 from last year, but the 20 megapixel rear-facing optics on the M9 do have a bit of a troublesome time trying to get low-light performance. But ultimately, you do get some good shots out in broad daylight, but it's in the low-light situations that we do have some problems, and even the grainy results coming from video. Now, we do have to preface this by saying that the M9 will get a software update in order to fix the camera issues, as we were told, so we are going to hold our reservations until we get that particular software update in our review unit in the coming weeks. And finally, in software, you wouldn't really be blamed if you saw the Sense on the M9 and thought it was much like the one on the M8. After all, a lot of the elements do remain the same despite the Lollipop additions, which you will already see in the notification dropdown and in the recent app screen if you choose to use the card view. But there are a few main additions to the M9 that we went through it in our first look, and they include the Sense Home widget, that is a contextual app launcher up front that will change the apps that it shows you based on your GPS location. It's kind of a nice interface that allows you to get your apps pretty easily, but it's also nice that it's just a widget, so you can put it away if you really don't want it. And after that, the theme engine is really probably the biggest part of Sense that we really like already. And even in this first iteration, it is a nice way of starting off a theming engine on what was originally just changing colors in the M8. This time around, you can change a lot of aspects of the operating system, even going as far as putting a picture inside, ideally your chosen wallpaper, and it will analyze the picture in order for you to find the right colors to change the elements in order to match that wallpaper. But all in all, you do get a very similar experience from one to the other, and whether or not these two devices are really a big step from one to the other is going to be up to you to decide, and we will go through a much fuller versus video once we get our hands on a review unit of the M9 to bring you our assessment of that very question. But nonetheless, we do like what the M9 brings to the table. It is a more refining of the design inside and out from HTC, where the only real weak spot at the moment is in the camera. And if you used the M8 from last year and you liked what it was able to do with its camera, well, that is exactly what we're going to really find out in our future comparison if the cameras really show a big improvement. But until then, keep it tuned to Android Authority for even more coverage of the HTC One M9, and remember to keep it tuned here for even more coverage of the Mobile World Congress 2015 in Barcelona, Spain.